Welcome to the deep dive. When you think about architectural design, you usually think about structural load. Like, you look at a massive concrete pillar in a parking garage, or, I don't know, the steel cables on a suspension bridge, and you know exactly how much weight they're designed to carry. The physical burden is visible.
Right.
It's calculated.
Yeah, exactly. You can literally see the tension in the materials. I mean, the architecture tells you exactly what kind of stress it is under.
Right. But then you look at human relationships, and suddenly that structural load becomes, well, entirely invisible. We all have these people in our lives, and, maybe you listening right now are this person, the one who seems to be carrying absolutely zero weight.
Oh, for sure. The low maintenance friend.
Exactly. The one who just goes with the flow, never complains, and somehow always makes everything smoother for everyone else. They just sort of float through the group dynamics.
Yeah. They are the human equivalent of open concept living. Effortless, airy, no visible supports.
Hmm.
Or, well, at least that is the very convincing illusion they project.
Right, the illusion. And breaking down that illusion is our mission today. We are taking a deep dive into a short, but incredibly viral piece of personal reflection titled The Heavy Weight of Being Easygoing.
It is such a dense, profoundly relatable excerpt.
It really is. It completely shatters the myth of the chill person. So our goal today is to explore the stark contrast between how easygoing people are perceived externally versus the heavy, exhausting emotional lifting they're actually doing internally, just to maintain that facade.
Right, because the author managed to map out an entire psychological ecosystem in just a few sentences.
Yeah.
We get to see the visible daily symptoms, trace them all the way down to their childhood root causes, and finally examine the rather uncomfortable way society actively rewards people for hiding their pain.
Okay, let's unpack this by starting with the very first thing the author lays out. Before we get into the psychology of why they feel this way, they give us a checklist, like the physical and everyday emotional symptoms of their mindset.
Yes, the specific actions.
Right, so they write, I catch myself apologizing for everything, staying quiet even when something bothers me, and feeling guilty for needing help with the smallest things. And they explicitly state that their ultimate goal is to take up as little space as possible.
Wow. What's fascinating here is that phrase alone, taking up no space, is incredibly evocative.
Yeah, it really is.
It shifts the conversation from just a personality trait to a literal physical and emotional disappearing act.
A disappearing act, exactly. It really makes me think of trying to be a ghost in your own life. Like you are trying to walk so lightly, stepping on eggshells so carefully that you don't even leave footprints in the snow. You're just, well, not there.
Right. You erase yourself.
But I want to ask you about the specific combination of these behaviors. Like, why do these three things, apologizing constantly, silencing your own discomfort, and aggressively rejecting help, always seem to cluster together in this way?
Well, we typically view those three behaviors as isolated, mostly harmless quirks, right? We tend to think someone is just overly polite, or a little shy, or maybe fiercely independent.
Sure, yeah, just personality quirks.
Exactly. But when you observe them clustered together, you aren't looking at random personality traits. You are looking at a highly coordinated, active strategy of self-minimization.
Wait, an active strategy? That implies it takes work.
Oh, it takes a tremendous amount of work.
It's like having 90% of your computer's memory dedicated to a background virus scan you can't turn off. You might look totally fine and functional on the desktop, but behind the scenes, every single task is taking twice as much energy to execute.
That is the perfect way to look at it. Think about the massive cognitive load required to constantly monitor your environment to ensure you aren't an inconvenience.
Right, checking every angle.
Apologizing for everything serves as a preemptive strike against being perceived as a nuisance. And staying quiet when bothered requires the active, muscular suppression of your own boundaries.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. And feeling guilty for needing help with the smallest things is this deep internalization that your very existence is a debt you have to constantly pay off. So it isn't just about minimizing physical presence. It is about actively erasing your emotional footprint so nobody trips over you.
Oh man, I imagine someone sitting at their desk at work drafting an email to ask a colleague for a completely standard necessary file.
Oh, yes. The email drafting.
Right, and they spend 20 minutes rewriting the email, adding exclamation points, using the word just, like just checking in or just wondering, terrified that a simple request will be interpreted as a demand. That is exhausting.
Highly exhausting. It requires the person to be in a state of perpetual hypervigilance. They are constantly scanning the room at a dinner party, reading everyone else's micro-expression.
Trying to fix things before they break.
Yes, trying to anticipate the needs of the group while simultaneously burying their own. So the deep irony of taking up no space is that executing that strategy actually takes up almost all of this person's internal energy.
And that makes the author's opening phrase so much more tragic, you know? They say, I catch myself apologizing.
Right.
Catching themselves.
Yeah, they aren't consciously choosing to say sorry. Their brain is just running that background virus scan of self-effacement on a loop, and they only occasionally become aware of the toll it's taking.
The reflex is so fast they can't even intercept it.
Oh.
But, I mean, nobody is born running that kind of exhausting psychological software.
No, definitely not.
You don't see toddlers aggressively apologizing for wanting a snack or trying to take up less space in a sandbox.
Which brings us to the origins of all this. These behaviors of self-minimization don't just magically appear out of the ether when you turn 25. They are learned survival strategies.
Exactly.
And the author gives us the exact origin story in the text, writing, growing up, it felt like having needs automatically made you difficult or selfish.
Those are crushing labels to place on a developing brain. To conflate a basic human requirement with a moral failure. Difficult and selfish.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. It defies the very nature of biology. Every living thing has needs. It is like a plant being taught that needing water makes it a difficult houseplant.
That is a great analogy.
Thanks. So I want to make sure I am mapping this out correctly. How does a child's brain make that monumental jump from simply having a basic biological or emotional need, like wanting attention or comfort, to automatically labeling themselves as inherently selfish?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture of child development, that monumental jump actually makes perfect, heartbreaking sense. Children are fundamentally egocentric.
Right. Everything is about them.
Yes, but not in an arrogant, narcissistic way, just in a purely developmental way. They believe they are the center of the universe and that they are the direct cause of everything that happens around them.
So if I am a 5-year-old, my literal survival depends entirely on the adults in the room. Like, I don't have a job, I don't have a car, I can't buy groceries, my caregivers are gods to me.
Precisely. They are gods.
And if my gods are stressed out, emotionally unavailable, or easily overwhelmed when I ask for food or comfort, my brain can't accept that my caregivers are flawed. That is way too dangerous.
It would threaten your entire sense of security.
Right. So instead, I decide that my hunger is the flaw. I blame the need.
You have hit the exact mechanism. A child simply does not have the cognitive capacity to think, oh, my parents are dealing with systemic financial stress and lack emotional bandwidth today.
Right. They can't process that.
No, they only know two variables. I have a need, and expressing this need causes the giant people who keep me alive to become angry, sigh heavily, or withdraw their affection.
And a child will always choose attachment over their own comfort.
Always. Because maintaining that attachment is a biological imperative for survival. The caregivers must be right.
Wow.
Therefore, the child concludes the need itself must be the problem. And because I have the need, I am the problem.
That word the author uses, automatically, suddenly carries so much weight. Having needs automatically made you difficult.
It is immediate.
Yeah, it means there was no deliberation. There was no grace period. Need equals selfish, cause and effect. So to ensure their survival and to maintain the love and stability of their family unit, they learn to surgically remove their own needs from the equation.
They become the easy child. They amputate a core part of their humanity to fit into the ecosystem they were born into.
Yeah, that is bleak.
They learn to self-soothe in a vacuum, to never ask for too much, and to become the emotional shock absorbers for everyone else's stress.
So what does this all mean for them as an adult? Because this brings us to the core tension of our deep dive today. The author has taken this childhood survival mechanism and carried it seamlessly into adulthood, and society loves it.
Oh, society absolutely loves it.
Right. The text says, now people describe me as easygoing, but honestly, a lot of the time I am just scared of being a burden.
We are looking at the tragic irony of the easygoing persona. The outside world sees a calm, undisturbed lake.
Meanwhile,
They're completely oblivious to the person furiously paddling underwater just to keep from drowning.
I read that line and thought about the last group trip I went on. There is always that one person who ends up sleeping on the worst, most uncomfortable pull-out couch.
Oh,
Always. You know the one. Without a blanket, positioned right next to the noisy kitchen. And they do it because they didn't want to make a fuss about the room assignments. And then we praise them the next morning for being such a team player.
it is the perfect setup for them to hide their discomfort.
Exactly. It is like they are wearing a t-shirt that says relaxed over a heavy suit of medieval armor. Everyone is complimenting their cool t-shirt, completely ignoring the fact that they are sweating and struggling under 50 pounds of steel just to stand upright.
And that person on the couch probably didn't sleep a single wink.
Yeah.
But their fear of inconveniencing the group was vastly stronger than their desire for a comfortable bed.
Let me hit pause for a second, though, because I am struggling with this a bit. I have friends who I genuinely believe are just chill people.
Sure.
Like, if we are picking a restaurant for dinner, they honestly do not care. They say, whatever you guys want is fine, and they mean it. Are we pathologizing everyone who goes with the flow here?
That is a very fair question.
How do I tell the difference between my friend being truly relaxed and my friend having a silent panic attack because they are terrified of picking the wrong restaurant?
That is a crucial distinction to make. We aren't saying flexibility doesn't exist. True easygoingness comes from a place of secure attachment and internal safety.
Okay, so what does that look like?
A truly relaxed person says, I don't mind where we eat, because they genuinely don't have a strong preference in that moment. But, and this is the key, if they did have a seafood allergy or if they just really had a craving for Italian food, they would feel perfectly comfortable voicing it.
Because they aren't afraid of the reaction.
Right. They know their preference won't destroy the relationship or make you angry.
They feel safe enough to be slightly inconvenient. They know the relationship can handle the weight of their opinion.
Yes, exactly. But the author of our text, and the friend sleeping on the terrible couch, isn't experiencing flexibility. They're experiencing the freeze response.
Wow, the freeze response.
They aren't saying, I don't mind, because they are relaxed. They are saying it because the very idea of stating a preference triggers that visceral childhood terror of being difficult.
Right. It is a trauma response.
The tragedy is that society looks at both behaviors, the genuinely secure, relaxed person and the terrified, freezing person, and hands them the exact same label, easygoing.
And we don't just label it, we actively reward it. We heavily incentivize this trauma response because it is incredibly convenient for everyone else. Think about the workplace.
Workplaces thrive on this.
Right. Managers love the low-maintenance employee. Oh, Sarah's such a rock star. She never complains about staying late. She just gets it done. Or in relationships, like, he's the best partner, so chill. We literally never argue.
We do reward it. If you are terrified of being a burden, you become the perfect, frictionless cog in any machine you enter. You absorb extra work without ever asking for a raise or a promotion.
Just keeping your head down.
Yes, you swallow your partner's bad moods or thoughtless comments without ever asking for an apology. You make everyone else's life infinitely easier at the total expense of your own internal reality.
You basically become an instrument for other people's comfort.
Precisely. You become a tool for their ease.
Which perfectly explains why the author feels like an imposter in their own life. People describe me as easygoing, but honestly, you know. They know it is a facade. They know they're wearing the armor while everyone else is complimenting the t-shirt.
Carrying that dissonance, the massive gap between how the world perceives your effortless nature and how terrified and exhausted you actually are on the inside, is where the heavy weight in the title truly comes from.
It has to be crushing.
It is. The emotional labor of maintaining the camouflage takes a devastating toll over time.
And eventually, that camouflage just gets too heavy to carry. Which brings us to the vulnerable final thought in the author's reflection. They put this out to the internet, asking, anyone else figure this out about themselves later on?
It is a very raw question.
It is, and there are two distinct elements there, I think. The desperate desire for a community of people who understand, anyone else, and the realization that this epiphany was severely delayed. It happened later on.
Right, the timing is key.
So why does it take so long? If you are carrying this 50-pound suit of armor your whole life, why does it take until you are in your late 20s or your 30s or even your 50s to finally look in the mirror and see the dynamic for what it is?
Well, this raises an important question about how we evaluate our own mental health and coping mechanisms. Human beings rely heavily on social feedback to gauge how they are doing.
Sure, we look to others to see if we're acting normal.
Exactly. And you rarely question a coping mechanism if everyone around you is handing you awards for it.
Oh, that makes total sense. Like, If my coping mechanism was blowing up and screaming at people every time I got stressed, or disappearing for days at a time without telling anyone, society would intervene immediately.
There would be instant pushback.
Right, I would face social consequences. My boss would write me up, my friends would stop calling, or my partner would sit me down and say, look, we need to talk about your behavior. This is unacceptable.
Because in those scenarios, your coping mechanism is inconveniencing other people. The friction forces an intervention.
But when you are the easygoing one,
Exactly. If your coping mechanism is being overly accommodating, hyper-independent, and silently absorbing everyone else's stress so they don't have to deal with it, you never get interventions.
you just get more praise.
You get promoted at work.
Yeah.
You get called a great listener by friends who only ever talk about themselves. You get told you are the glue holding a dysfunctional family together.
Wow.
The negative feedback loop that usually prompts self-reflection simply does not exist for the chronic over-accommodator.
So they just keep going. They keep absorbing the hits, thinking they're doing the right thing, being the good person, while internally running entirely on fumes.
Until the physical and psychological toll demands to be paid.
Because you can't run on fumes forever.
No, you can't. The realization usually happens later on because the human body and mind can only sustain that level of suppression for so long. Eventually, the strategy breaks down.
What does that breakdown look like?
We see this manifest as severe burnout, where someone simply cannot get out of bed to answer another email. We see it in autoimmune flare-ups, chronic fatigue, or sudden, seemingly unexplainable panic attacks.
The body just says, no more.
Exactly. Or sometimes a person simply looks around one day and realizes they have built an entire life, a career, and a marriage that are entirely tailored to everyone else's needs, and they have absolutely no idea who they actually are.
That is heartbreaking.
The camouflage drops because the muscles holding it up finally give out.
And that is the terrifying moment they reach out and ask anyone else.
Hmm.
Because once you realize you've been living this way, it can feel incredibly lonely.
Very lonely.
You realize your friends and colleagues love the easygoing version of you, and you suddenly have to wonder, will they still love me or want me around if I actually have needs, if I start taking up space?
It is a terrifying transition.
Yeah.
You are risking the very attachments you spent your whole life trying to protect.
Yeah, the stakes feel so high.
But recognizing the mask is the absolute prerequisite to taking it off. Asking anyone else is the first courageous step toward finding a community that validates your reality, rather than just praising your utility to them.
It is a profound paradigm shift. We have really journeyed through the entire emotional life cycle of this phenomenon today. We started with the exhausting everyday symptoms, catching yourself over-apologizing for existing, silencing your own discomfort.
Right, acting like a ghost to avoid leaving a footprint in the snow.
Exactly. And then we traced that background virus scan back to its installation, that childhood conditioning where basic human needs were incorrectly labeled as being difficult or selfish.
Forcing a child to amputate their own desires just to secure love and survival.
Yeah. And finally, we dismantled the facade itself. The revelation that what society enthusiastically praises as easygoing is often just a socially acceptable mask for the deep-seated fear of being a burden.
A mechanism that works perfectly for everyone else right up until the moment the heavy suit of armor entirely breaks the person carrying the weight.
Unlearning this has to require a fundamental rewiring of how a person perceives their basic right to exist.
Oh, absolutely. It requires learning that you do not have to earn your place in a room by making yourself invisible.
So I want to turn this over to you, listening right now. Take a moment to reflect on your own tendencies, or maybe the tendencies of the people closest to you. Are the easygoing people in your life, or the easygoing parts of yourself, truly at peace?
It is an important question. Are they genuinely relaxed? Or are they wearing that heavy suit of armor beneath a very chill t-shirt?
Are they just making themselves small? It is so worth examining the invisible loads we ask the people around us to carry and the loads we silently agree to carry ourselves.
I could not agree more.
And I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over today, something that builds on this entire realization. If being easygoing is sometimes a learned camouflage to avoid being a burden, well, what would it look like and just how uncomfortable might it feel at first to consciously choose to be just a little bit difficult today?
That is a great challenge.
What if you practice taking up space by asking for exactly what you need without apologizing for it? It might feel terrifying, but remember what we talked about at the beginning. You are not a ghost.
You don't have to float through a room leaving no footprints.
Exactly. You are allowed to have structural load. You are allowed to have weight. And the people who truly love you won't mind carrying it with you.